Well, to say we're in the weeds means that we're back with our special show from Valiant, and I'm always looking forward to those shows. Valiant has been a great sponsor for radio entrepreneurs, and it's always interesting to talk cannabis. So first of all, I want to welcome back my co-host, Chris Tenaglia, COO at Valiant. Welcome back.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Excited to be here today.
Great. And our guest, someone you know well, who I'm going to get to know, I hope, is Ashley Manning, industry advisor and connector. I like that connector bit. That's always an interesting title nowadays. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you for having me, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
And also Chris.
Absolutely.
So are you a cannabis industry connector?
I love to connect the dots. I think without being a connector, it's hard to get anything done because it's a very small industry. So being able to connect when you have a problem, to have that solution, it just naturally happens. So without it, I don't think this industry would thrive. Well, we're going from surviving to thriving, as some would say.
It's a small industry is an understatement. It's a very large industry over the whole country, but I think we all know each other, everybody. It's kind of crazy.
It sure is.
So tell us about yourself. Tell us what you do.
And then tell us how you know Chris.
Well, I've been in the industry for about 8 years. Started off as a successful cannabis patient myself. Came off all the pharmaceuticals. I've had 11 surgeries, had hardware taken out of my spine, had hardware taken out of my femur, and was working in the hospital at the time and realized how much that this plant could actually help benefit not only the people, but the planet, which is so much bigger than the cannabis industry in itself. So I decided to resign from working in the healthcare field and wanted to work in the cannabis industry. Decided to gain everything I could working in each cannabis vertical, from cultivation, manufacturing, retail, to most recently running a national cannabis trade association, where we help regulators write effective policy. We help write national standards, identifying the needs of the industry, providing solutions to them, and being able to execute on them on the back end with operators, but then also at the front end of policy, because you got to have a good balance between the two to really actually move this industry forward. Otherwise, we're just sitting there doing nothing, just talking.
Actually, one of the main characteristics you learn from entrepreneurs is from adversity to advantage. And are you saying that's a characteristic that you've taken advantage of?
1,000,000%.
1,000,000%.
Yes, it's those, without that adversity, there's no challenges. And I am someone, I think most entrepreneurs like to challenge that status quo. So go ahead, challenge us, and we're going to find a solution to that big problem, because that's what we do as entrepreneurs.
Speaking of finding solutions, can you tell us about your experience in Maine? We understand that you had a pretty big influence across that state for sure. We spent a lot of time up there.
It's actually Vermont. I was an advisor for the Vermont Cannabis Control Commission during the time of implementing policy and change. And so I was one of the advisors on compliance and enforcement. Given my experience most heavily in the California market, because that's where it all started and where I'm located, I was able to identify the challenges we saw in California in a larger market. As we progressed into the East Coast, I was able to apply all of the failures that we've made in California and made sure that Vermont implemented the strongest policy possible on all fronts, down to sustainability, which many states have continuously forgot about, which without sustainability, we're never going to be able to sustain ourselves as an industry. So that was a very intimidating time to actually be on the board with 24 other people who had PhDs, and they're government officials and lawyers, and I don't have a degree. I don't want to say all I brought to the table, but what I brought to the table was the experience and the voices of the industry to make sure policy was being wrote effectively with the voices of people who really have been truly pioneering the way.
Well, you may be an example of what Valiant says, and that is you might not have the degrees, but clearly you were in the weeds and you understood the industry.
Yes, definitely.
So tell us about your experience with one thing that we do here at Valiant is we try to promote economic empowerment, social equity, women in business. Can you tell us about some of your experiences and pitfalls, and again, same thing with adversity about being a woman in that position with that situation, probably mostly men on that board, and people especially being in an intimidating situation like that, and how you prevailed.
Ooh, that was a tough one. I'll say
like
I sweat through a lot of shirts to start, but it really honestly, it started off very difficult, but being able to raise my voice, not in a yelling manner, but unfortunately have to talk a little bit louder, have to be a little bit more clear in your communication to be heard, which yes, that is very unfair, but if you prevail through that adversity, once again, you can get through it and you learn through it. And once you do it a couple times, it just keeps going with being able to communicate regardless of your gender, your race, any of the above, not having the degree. And then if it was in-person meetings, I had to wear heels just so I'm a little bit taller too, because you don't get seen either. I also, another tip that I like to share with other people, whether you're male or female, don't be afraid to take that seat at the end of the table when you walk into a room. Whether you think you're the boss or you're not the boss, just don't be afraid to take that seat at the end of the table. You really are able to be heard, you're able to be listened to, and you're able to also observe and listen to what the constituents at the table have to say as well. I feel that's something people miss and are afraid of in terms of that adversity and feeling like the low man on the totem pole as a woman.
Well, you're basically saying don't be shy to take the obvious seat at the table that would make you stick out.
Yes.
What are you most proud of about what you've accomplished with Vermont?
The sustainability aspect of Vermont's legislation and policy. Hemp in particularly has the ability to save the planet and help mitigate climate control. And what I saw in Vermont is they actually heard and took sustainability very seriously when having that conversation. And to me, that's going to set Vermont different. It's going to set it apart from any other state. And that's in terms, not just, depending on how our audience here, sustainability isn't just having biodegradable plastics and recycling. It's also making sure that your team is diverse in all areas. You're following ESG protocols, which are economic, social, and government components to your business. And that is incredibly important to the growth of the industry, but also their business. And also goes back to what Chris said about economic empowerment, social equity. There's so much to that goes into sustainability. And that's really a bigger passion and a bigger picture for cannabis in general is sustainability for the people, the businesses, and the planet. And then we can all get rich.
Well, the one portion about sustainability when it comes to the construction industry, what we always have to take into consideration is these cultivation facilities are just such an energy suck across you have complex HVAC systems, but the problem is a lot of the architects and engineers, they haven't taken into consideration there are other means and methods to be able to get to where you need to get without having to pull 8,000 amps from a grid that's purely just going into growing a plant. So you're kind of being a little counterproductive. So sustainability is a huge up on the forefront of across the country right now. So I'm glad you guys were able to pioneer it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thinking to the front end of that, it's having effective policy to understand the importance, because a lot of them don't want they want it to be an indoor grow because it's safe, it's more secure, and all this other stuff. It is more secure in my eyes in terms of biosecurity for the plant and keeping the plant safe and healthy. But in terms of what it's doing to the environment, I believe maybe a couple months ago, there was a statistic that came out that said a cannabis cultivation facility emits more carbon emissions than an Apple facility, meaning the Apple Mac computers facility. So that is a huge problem. We are doing a disservice on many levels. So we need to fight for sustainability on the front end to be able to allow for outdoor grows in areas in the climate that can actually optimize the year-round growing life cycle of the plant.
Well, actually, you've been quite modest. You've been You've had leadership positions in national organizations. Before we go, could you tell people what some of those positions were?
Yeah, I have been the chief operating officer for the National Association of Cannabis Businesses for about 4 years. Also, the chief operating officer for a media company. I most recently just left that company, and prior to that, it was mostly helping brands scale, build the brand, getting operations going, hiring the right talent, keeping the right talent, and helping these brands get to the next level so they can start making some money versus trying to survive, to going to thriving.
Right. Ashley, if someone were looking to connect with you, how would they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, but I am on a little bit of a sabbatical on LinkedIn. I find it to be a bit of a distraction. So you can find me at Ashley Manning, ASHLEY Manning, MANNING 0305 at outlook.com. And I'm happy to share my phone number too, 412-551-2633.
Right. And Chris, if someone wants to find you and Valiant, how would they find you guys?
You can always go to our website at valiant-america.com. You can always reach me on my cell phone. I'm always available at 617-462-7895.
And you can always find Valiant and Ashley in this interview on the Radio Entrepreneurs website as well. My name is Jeffrey Davis, founder of Radio Entrepreneurs and host, and also CEO of Mage LLC. And this is Radio Entrepreneurs.